funny. I'm like, is this my new favorite thing? Is actors playing themselves as dingbats? I saw Elliot Gould play stupid Elliot Gould on the Kaminsky Method, and it was... Ugh.
That's good. Yeah. Just enough satire to know that they're having fun with it.
Yeah. So I'm like, I'm here for it. That's
awesome.
I'm like, that's such a fun blend of arrogance and humidity. Arrogance and humidity. Arrogance and humility. So
I kind of like arrogance and humidity.
That's good.
Elliot Gould was so moist. There's your episode title for this one.
Absolutely. Yeah. My new trick is clipping like one little thing and then putting it at the beginning and then rolling the intro and then going into it. So that'll definitely be it. That'll definitely be the one. We're up and we are live. Okay, cool. So hello, Internet. Hope you are well. This is another creator interview on the Electric Dice podcast. Tonight we are joined by two fantastic literary authors of the horror genre. They are Greg Stolze and Benjamin Allocco.
Hello.
And I think rather than listen to my boring old words, I'm just going to actually turn it over to both of them to do a quick or long, their choice, little introduction.
Okay. My name is Greg Stolze. I first got published in 1996, which now sounds so long ago that I'm surprised I wasn't waving a buggy whip and, chasing women in crinolines. But I've been at it for a while. I've designed a lot of games and written a lot of fiction. And so I've generally been busy with this, which seems to be what I'm good at. And I do think the world is better off with me as, say, a horror writer than a thoracic surgeon.
Well, I will jump in next. So my name is Benjamin Allocco. I also have one book out at this point. Currently trying to get another one published, but that's a whole process in and of itself. So first book, it's called Deathform. It came out in 2016. If you're into kind of like aliens, that whole vibe, action, sci-fi action / horror, it might be up your alley. I also co-host the horror podcast Last Year's Horror with my wife. And that we just moved to once a month, but we are still going strong. Started it earlier this year, and so we're still discussing movies from 2019 if you want to tune into that. It's a lot of fun.
All right.
Cool. All right. I apologize. I'm being bad and using social media during the interview, but it's only to get people into the room.
We're not that important, You do you, Dave.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. So the
Speak for yourself, Ben. I'm deeply offended.
So the trick here was, if you have ever stopped in and listened to me talk, you know that I spend more time playing games than reading them, or even reading books. Period. So I, in my infinite wisdom, saw fit to invite Ben onto the podcast, so he could talk to Greg, and they would have something to talk about, and I. We'll just sit back and enjoy and just smile and look pretty. And my hair doesn't look great today, so I guess I'm going to smile. So yeah, Ben, obviously you can jump in anytime you either have a follow-up, and I put a couple questions in. I just was like, shut up, Dave, let Ben talk. So, Greg, you did kind of start this a little bit, but I would love for you to kind of elaborate a little on, for those fans of ours, or indeed these people who may be discovering you for the first time that haven't followed your game design and literary works obsessively. Can you tell us just a little bit about your background?
I worked for AEG for a while, and I wrote a bunch of stuff for White Wolf for a while, and while I was doing, stuff for large companies, or really at that point medium-sized companies, I was also kind of like, well, I also kind of want to do my own things. And companies as a general rule are like, we would like you to do our thing. So I sort of straddled the line of doing indie stuff and doing, stuff, other people's stuff. And was fortunate enough that my wife got a good enough job that when we had our first child, I could stay home, parent, and write. And that actually made more financial sense than, keeping up a half-time job that would just about, but not quite cover childcare. So, and now that child is in college. So, worked on World of Darkness stuff, worked on Delta Green, worked on Legend of the Five Rings back before it was a D20 game. Came up with the One Roll engine, which is the foundation of Wild Talents and Rain. So yeah, I've done a lot of gaming stuff. Worked on The Unspeakable Oath, and in between doing all this, did some fiction and some other small indie games. Recently did one called $1 Million Soulmate, which is a 2-player game about romantic uncertainty, where you play out this burgeoning relationship where that these two people are going to have an intense, profound impact on one another. But until the very last scene, when you roll the dice, you don't know if this is positive or negative. So the relationship will either be the healthy thing that makes you a better, more complete person, or it will be the perfect enablement that will turn you into your worst self. So you have to do everything up to that point in this, this very ambiguous space. So yeah, that came out recently. That's fun. Termination Shock, a science fiction game, is also something that I wrote and have started a little publishing company with 2 other writers and an artist to do Termination Shock stuff. And, we started that in 2020 and are like, this is going to be a great year for everything.
This is our year.
This fabulous year. Exciting.
It's so disappointing.
So, yeah.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go.
What was the $1 Million Soulmate? Is that what you said the game was? Because I do not recall seeing that pass by me, and it's kind of interesting. Oh. I like the idea. Is it designed to play in one sitting, or will it?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
It's one and done.
Right. Just sitting there and kind of wondering and wait. It's a lot like life, right? You never know.
That sounds very stressful and awesome. I want to play that.
You really don't want to do it for more than one session. And one of the things I funded was a bunch of podcasts of me playing it with assorted people. So a few of those have gotten out of editing and are up. So I'll send you the links to all this.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to get them into chat, and then also in like the eventual YouTube description too. One of the goals is like try and drive people to find the thing they should not have to work very hard. If they somehow got this far, let us make their journey just a tiny bit easier.
It's just one more step.
Just one more step, please. You want to. We need the click-throughs.
So I have a follow-up question, I think, to all that, Greg. I am ashamed to say, with both of you, that I am not much of a gamer. So maybe Dave's not much of a reader. I'm balancing that equation for this interview right now.
One Dave Perner plus one Ben Allocco equals almost a Greg Stolze. Like, it's not quite, but it's very, and that was the goal, right? Like.
So I think though my question is, like, I could see how certain types of games can be influenced by, the notion, obviously, of story, especially RPGs, right? And what you're doing in a novel is you're telling a story, you're trying to pace it out and hit all the points that you want to hit and everything. So I'm wondering if you can speak to how your passion for both of those things kind of feed into one another. And I'm curious, as kind of a follow-up, maybe the two-parter here is like, which do you think feeds into the other one more? Is there one that's kind of predominant?
It's like they're very, very different. And, writing fiction feels like such a relief after, like, say, running a game, because it's like, oh, finally, I don't have to worry about anyone else's feelings, and no one is going to throw some crazy jack move at me that I wasn't anticipating. And, at last, I just have something that starts when I want it to start and stops when I want it to stop. And the flip side of that with gaming is that, oh man, this is great. I don't have to just pull all this out of myself. I can go to other people and be surprised and, play off of them and get this back and forth, which is, it's really a lot of creativity works better when you can bounce it off someone, or at least it does for me. I know there are people who do the complete Garrett approach of, I'm going to be totally isolated and bring forth of myself this perfect expression, but I'm always open to input. I'm in a writer's group and I'm always like, is this stupid? Should I just end it here and not do this part? And they're like, no, the end part's good. And, show the book to 5 people you trust, and if 2 of them point out the same thing and say, this is a problem, you may have a problem. So...
Do you share work like before you consider it finished?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, when is something ever finished? I mean,
yeah.
I'm looking at
in quotes finished.
Before I certainly show things to people before I feel they're good enough.
Yeah.
Because I mean, if I've gotten something to a point where I'm like, oh, I shall step back. It belongs to the ages now. Yeah, why? Well, one, I'm capable of tremendous arrogance, but I think even that is beyond me. Yeah, I mean, I want to show it to people before I'm happy with it, because there are... Okay, you want to hear a great story?
Yes, absolutely.
All right, I wrote this story called Careful She Bites, which is told in the form of, you get one character's sort of half of a dominated monologue. One character is this huge motor mouth, and she's just like, blah, 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 blah. And so you get the whole story from hearing her talk about things. And she and this other girl are in basically an asylum. And so, you get everything she's telling this girl about, oh, well, here's how you got to deal with being in an asylum. It's a lot better than prison. It's a lot better than jail. Take it from me. You don't want to wind up in jail. Here's how you manipulate your therapist. And I wrote this whole thing, and I'm like, this seems good, but I feel like it could be better. I feel like there's something missing, but I'm too close to it to see what the gap is. And so I took it to my writers group, and one of the women there is, this retired, I think her husband was a minister, and she is always bringing in these pieces in which she reflects about, how blessed her life has been. And I've got this, blood-soaked thing about violent teenage crazy girls, and she fixed it with one sentence. She read it, and I'm like, yeah, I feel like something's wrong. And she's like, I just wish I could have heard the other girl for one sentence. And I'm like, that's the silver bullet. So, right. And it's not the first time I've had an editor fix stuff that I could not have fixed on my own. So yeah, I'm real okay with showing people how the sausage gets made, if I trust their opinions.
Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, I was just gonna say, not to call myself arrogant, but I'm very protective. Like I'm sure you know there's like different types of writers. There's writers who do like want to write the thing and immediately send it out into the world. And probably shouldn't right away, you know. and then there's you know, but there is a point where like everybody needs feedback, and so like I do ask for feedback and everything, but like I hold it really close until I'm like I am finally ready to show this to somebody, and I can take feedback, and people can be real harsh and real honest, and like that's exactly what I expect, because otherwise they're just giving you bad feedback. But yeah, I'm kind of on the other side of that, where I'm like, I don't want to show anybody until like I'm sure I've got all the typos out. I like.
How long have you been writing for professional publication? I mean, how many years?
Well,
it's a tricky question.
I mean, so yeah, it is. I mean, I have a smattering of like literally a handful of short stories out, but you know, 2016, like I said, was my first novel. It's fairly short, and then since then, I've been working on this one project that I'm just
so
I just took it through some big revisions.
The longer you go, eventually, that tender, sensitive part of you that says, "This, my work, is myself," that just dies off, and you know, and that's okay. You know, you get to be a little leathery, and you get to the point where if someone says, "Oh, you know, here's this problem with you. I got a real problem with your work right here. Here's your problem. Here's what's busted." You get to where you can look at it and say either, "Oh, yeah, that I really was going out of the house with my fly down. Okay." Or conversely, you can look at it and you're like, respectfully disagree. I can see why you don't like it, but I'm going to keep it. And
yeah, you know, I was just gonna say, I think for me, it's not even that. You know what it primarily is that I hate when people point out the things that I already know I need to fix. So I try to get it to where like I'm like, I don't see anything else I could possibly do here to make it good, and so like I almost obsess over it until I'm pretty sure I've ironed everything out, which does make it not difficult later, but like, you know, you do kind of look at feedback a little bit differently, and you're like, maybe this person's wrong. I don't know, because that's a lot of work to change that thing.
You know, you can accept that people can criticize your work and be wrong.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I don't have much in the way of writing experience from it, but when I was in college doing art, I had my favorite art professor. That was her favorite thing to do, was break people of their like precious behaviors. If she knew you were like that, she would specifically come to you like while you were in the zone and disrupt it by like ruining your canvas, right? Draw something on it, smear some paint across it. She's like, if you got one thing out of my class, she's like, I'll go ahead and ruin it for you. Now you don't have to worry about it.
Wow.
I am also, as a human being, I'm that first writer, right? Like, I thrive in this live environment. Just do it. I will always do a thing over not do a thing. I'm much more interested in it being done than it being complete. Or, well, I guess that's not the right. That's not the right phrase, but it's like it being done rather than being perfect.
Yeah, the perfect is the enemy of the done.
Right. Exactly.
And yeah, most errors people will not notice or care. Every published book on your shelf is a little imperfect, and there are, you know, I have seen projects where people have said, yeah, you know, I think it's 98% perfect now, but I'm going to take another 8 months to get it to 99% perfect.
Right.
And I'm like,
but should you?
Yeah. And sometimes, you know, sometimes I should.
True. Right. Like in your example there, you know, I'm curious now. I want to read the book just to hear the one line, because I have my theories, right? I think it can only be one of two things, but like that one line, that 1% mathematically for the book could have been 80%, right? You know, more.
My one line from my example is the end of the short story "Careful She Bites." It's on my website, so I started it out, and you will read it, and you will get to that last line, and you'll be like, "Oh, yeah,
there it is. He did it."
That sweet aging lady was completely right.
Yeah. I mean, they're pretty wise.
How fortunate you were to have her in your life.
Awesome. Cool. Okay. What do you think? On to question 2. Dare we?
Which one was question 2?
It says probably talked about above. Let's dig into God Cancer. Who, what,
Ah,
why, cool art, when? And Ben, you have follow-ups on this.
okay. Yes,
I have so many follow-ups. Whoa!
I've gotten my proof copy. It's going to be available print on demand. My plan is to crowdfund it through Kickstarter in October, when everyone's thinking about spooky stuff.
Smart.
I started this, man. I don't know what year I even started this.
You were 48, 49?
I'm 49. I'll be 50 in November.
No, because you in the back you talked about your dad.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, in the afterword, I talk about why cancer is this locus of terror for me, and it's because when I was a teenager, my father got cancer and died, and so it has always been this like thing, and I've known people who've had it and gotten over it, but it's always been just sort of this. It's like it's always behind you, and it's always like, oh, is today the day it comes out of remission? And so then I read this fantastic nonfiction book called The Emperor of All Maladies, which was written by an oncologist named Mukherjee. I think his first name's Siddhartha, but don't quote me on that. We can look it up.
That was my guess too when I saw it.
And it's beautifully written and beautifully paced, and it explains the science in a way that a lunkhead English major like me can understand it. And one of the things he talks about is that he's like, I don't think there's a cure for cancer because A, there are so many different cancers. B, cancer behavior is almost more a symptom than a disease itself. And C, to remove the potential for cancer from the human genome would be to change it so drastically that you would not really be human anymore. It's like, it's always there. You will get it if nothing else kills you first. And, on one hand, I'm like, wow, that's extremely sobering. But on the other hand, I'm like, well, but on the other hand, at least now I know.
Yeah, are they wrong, though?
Yeah.
So, I've always, because of my early life trauma, I have this phobia, and I'm like, let's deal with this. And it seemed like a good match for the Cthulhu Mythos cosmic horror approach of, there are these threats that you cannot understand and that are utterly indifferent to you, and they will get you, and the question is when. So I wrote this book, and it's got kind of this split narrative, which I can't even remember when I thought of doing it that way, but you have two sets of characters who never interact or cross over. And one is an oncologist who has been brought in to treat this billionaire who has terrible bone cancer. When I was doing the research for this, I'm like, what's the worst cancer? And someone's like, oh, it's bone. And I'm like, what's so bad about bone cancer? And they're like, look at the pictures.
You'll find out.
And I look at the pictures, and it's just these spines, and I'm like, yep, that's the one. And so you have a billionaire who is willing to spend any amount of money and countenance anything to live. And this doctor who is a little bit of, he means well, and he's like, okay, let's go on your yacht to international waters where I can do things that the written laws of men will not permit. So that's, narrative number one. And narrative number two is something of a sequel to the H.P. Lovecraft novella At the Mountains of Madness. in which a group of paleontologists and geologists go to seek the alien city in Antarctica. And the two narratives, both of them have bad stuff happen to them in various milieus. All the people on the billionaire's yacht, it's the pains of illness and of these emotional and interpersonal conflicts. And then in Antarctica, you have there's interpersonal conflicts there too, but also monsters plus freezing.
Weird, right?
Yeah. Well, I always loved John Carpenter's The Thing. I think it's really a masterwork. So I probably should have cited that as an influence as well. But yes, eventually stuff happens on the boat that no one on the boat can explain, just as you get to the point in the narrative where the people in Antarctica are like, oh, this is humanity's place. Oh, this is why we exist. And so they never know what happened on the boat, but could have explained it. The people on the boat never have any clue of why things went so disastrously and grotesquely awry, without, giving too much away.
Sure. So
I just want to jump in and say to people, when this book is available, please read it. It's awesome.
Thank you.
Also, big fan of, it hit like all the things that I like in horror, isolation, like you said, they're in Antarctica. I love that. Also huge fan of The Thing. So you kind of like you said, both of these you're kind of dealing, well, I don't want to give too much away, but monstrous things are happening, and I am a huge fan of monsters in general in my horror. And man, this book really, I read it in a day. So
wow,
one day.
That's high praise. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I like my monsters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So speaking of monsters, we had a question in chat. It says, any evil penguins? A vital part of Mountains of Madness.
I skipped the evil penguins. I couldn't really fit them in.
Yeah. Okay.
So I got some other weird stuff in there. There's a Shoggoth, which I'm just like, that's the monster that keeps on giving.
Mm-hmm.
Shoggoths were, the nature of Shoggoths was a major point in another novel I wrote, Mask of the Other, which you could create, these very, very, very tenuous connections between God Cancer and Mask of the Other. There's no characters in common, but like one character mentions, a fiery incident involving Iraqi temple seals, which connects to a short story, which connects to
right.
Mask of the Other.
What is that? Saint Elsewhere? Is that the one I'm thinking of?
No.
The TV show that like knitted together like 27 different.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. There are. Once you get into connecting TV shows together, it's like, oh yeah, The Simpsons and the X-Files take place in the same setting.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's Saint Elsewhere, but I could be wrong. Okay. The response from chat was heartbreaking but fair. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, does that technically mean that a bunch of your work takes place in Lovecraft's universe?
Well, I mean, the stuff that's clearly derived from At the Mountains of Madness and Shadow over Innsmouth. I mean, me and everyone else is
August Derleth and.
Well, there's just a multitude of people playing with this very robust set of tropes and tools. Me and Victor Laval. There's a phrase that I can only use in a very narrow set of circumstances.
Well, my follow-up was going to be, well, maybe Lovecraft stories take place in your universe, and there you go.
He got there first.
We're going to say that.
Yeah, you were being positive. We just thought you were being nitpicky. A whole new angle to the Electric Dice podcast. Did you have any other follow-ups, Ben?
Oh, I have a whole bunch.
Okay. Do you want to do one?
So, yeah, sure, absolutely. Let me pick and choose here. How long do we usually talk for?
We do an hour to an hour and a half.
Okay.
I'm led to believe we broke free from the restraints of a 6:45 Central. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm okay. I thought I had scheduled a double scheduled, but I was able to get that other call out of the way earlier.
Thank them for us.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So we're well within our rights to go another hour from now. I could push an hour 15 without bumping into anything else technically.
Cool. So yeah, because I mean, I have a couple questions, and I'd love to hear most, if not all of them. So I think, I mean, because we're talking about Lovecraft, obviously, and we do know that there are a lot of people that play in that universe, play with those tropes and everything. But I mean, this really feels to me, and it, in a lot of ways, you said it, I mean, it is essentially a sequel to At the Mountains of Madness. And so Lovecraft being obviously iconic to horror, was it intimidating to take on such a sort of a direct sequel almost? Like did you have kind of any reservations? Anything you wanted to keep in mind as you went, or were you just like, meh, I'm doing it?
So something a friend of mine pointed out, he's, I still have somehow retained some of my idealism about, oh yes, I'm creating art and this is one soul in communication with another soul across time and space. Whereas I've got this buddy who is very much like, this is how you grind the sausage. This is how you pack it in the casing. Any book that says Cthulhu on the cover will sell twice as much as the same content without Cthulhu on the cover. It's like, it's marketing gold. And this may be less true than it was before, but I mean,
it's not true.
If I'm gonna tell a horror story that can fit in with the the Cthulhu mythos giant universe, why would I not use that? It's a signpost for a lot of people that, if you like your horror to be like this, it will be like this. When people are buying their books, there's always this sort of tension between, well, I want it to be the same but different. And, you can, and as a creator, you tend to veer more towards wanting to be different. But it's not always necessary to reinvent the wheel. By having this be a shoggoth in my book instead of just, something that was described exactly the same, but they didn't know what it was. As soon as people read the phrase Tekeli, I have now gathered in all these other layers that other writers have been so gracious as to leave for me. Oh, and part of this book, incidentally, I went back, I found out the origin of the phrase Tekeli was not with Lovecraft, but was with Edgar Allan Poe and the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, which I read. Poe's only novel has reinforced to me what a strong writer of short stories he was. I can't really recommend it very strongly.
Okay, that was my instinct, but I was like, I'm not sure what that means. Do you wish he did more? No, that's not what he means.
It's got some good bits, but he also wrote it for money. And I kind of, knowing that he wrote it for money, I'm like, I can kind of see how this was, done as a serial, and where he was just trying to make it like a serial while also, indulging his innate Poe-ness. Okay. So, yeah, it's not great, but it did provide one of the things that happens in the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym is that these white sailors contact these the black natives of the Tsalal Islands, and they are the ones who talk about Tekeli, and it terrifies them, and it's associated with the color white. So having seen these Western ships come in with these gigantic white sails, they're like, oh, damn, this is it. And as it plays out, they're not wrong. And so in God Cancer, I decided I was going to have one of the characters be a descendant of natives from the Tsalal Islands. And she talks about how the events towards the end of the narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym looked from the other side. And talks about how, that was basically the death blow for the entire culture, was when these white dudes showed up with their white-sailed ships.
Yeah. Well, hearing you kind of say all that about the Arthur Gordon Pym book too, I mean, as I was reading your book and I was like, man, this is making me feel awful. I got to go back and read that Poe novel. And now I'm like, okay, maybe I'm safe. Maybe it's all right. Okay.
Read
all right,
Hop Frog. It's really good. Hop Frog's really good. Fall in the House of Usher, 2 thumbs up.
Yeah, you did, so we don't have to.
Perfect.
It's really a book for English. The copy
it's one of those.
It's a book for English majors. But the copy I got had these annotations and scholarly exegesis, and reading through it, I'm like, I feel like this scholar is writing about what he wants to be true, that he's like projecting meaning into this novel, because otherwise he's going to have to admit that he's based a lot of his scholarship on a book that's not that great. I don't know. Maybe he really did read it and say, oh, this is a masterwork of structural subtlety. Whereas I'm just, this crude, ham-fisted reader who read it and said, oh, hey, yeah, by the way, thanks for giving us like 8 solid dense pages on how you pack the hold of a ship, and then the horrors of cannibalism get like 2 paragraphs. Thanks, Ed.
Nice. Yeah. All right. I think I'll pass then.
That's funny.
So I did want to ask about this because like reading God Cancer, it's clear that you've done your research. There's depictions of life in Antarctica, the medical science stuff. I was like, man, this guy really knows what he's talking about. So, I mean, whether you do or not, I mean, it came off that way. So, I think for me, mission accomplished. So my question is, like what kind of research did you do to make, as you're approaching these 2 narratives that take quite an amount of research, it seems like. What kind of research did you do? How long did it take?
Part of it was Emperor of All Melodies. As I was reading that, I've got my highlighter, and I'm like, oh, this. Part of it, my brother's a nurse, so I once it was done, I'm like, sent it to him. I'm like, so tell me what's gonna make nurses laugh, and he's like, well, this, also this. And then you've got this part. And similarly, a niece of mine was in Antarctica over the winter doing laser-oriented astronomy. And so I'm like, what's Antarctica like, niece Claire? And she's like, well, Uncle Greg, it's very cold.
You're like, okay, cold, got it, nailed it.
Yeah.
And, and I watched some... a few documentaries. There's the one narrated by who's the guy who the one with the heavy German accent? We are all dust. Werner Herzog did.
Yep.
And he in this one he's like, they very much want me to do another one like the Penguins one, but that is not this movie. And that one, that one has some absolutely gorgeous underwater ice photography that really is, I'm like, it's worth it just for this, to see this profoundly weird landscape. But so I watched the documentaries and talked to my niece, and then, got him out of the base and out on the middle of the ice shelf where I could make everything up. And, a lot of the, some of the medical stuff I made up too. There is no such thing, as far as I know, as the Rapunzel technique of ocular surgery.
But we like to
That's
think
fantastic.
what it means. Just a braided ocular nerve going all the way back.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, well, I mean, I do think that like it came off as very authentic to me. And I was trying to remember, there's that one, because I have like a soft spot for Antarctica too. So I've
you
seen
dance fast enough, they
documentary.
can't really tell if your steps are accurate.
Right. So was it just like coincidence that your niece had gone to Antarctica, or were you like, my niece is in Antarctica, I can write this book, or like
Yeah,
did that just fall in place? Huh?
It was just a happy accident.
Wow.
I mean, I imagine
lucky.
it's like the seven degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? Like if you go far enough, someone will have spent time in Antarctica. Mine is actually my oceanography professor. He went there for some research project, but yours,
I mean, people go.
Yeah, you have a lot more access being. Yeah. So okay, I was gonna try and be clever about it, but I couldn't check my facts fast enough. Am I correct in remembering you're the one who said if you want to write a good horror story, get a paramedic drunk?
My recommendation for the lazy way is yes. Ask a first responder or a paramedic or a cop what is the worst thing you've ever seen on the job.
Mm-hmm.
Then write that, only really it's secretly vampires or a ghost or Cthulhu.
Yeah. So I'm gonna.
Yeah, that is.
Oh, go ahead.
That works.
Yeah. I'm going to steal those from you for a minute, Ben, because this is a perfect lead in to. So I've done a couple of these creator interviews. They always work best when you're the person you're talking to. So obviously I played a lot of Delta Green. Obviously I played a ton of Unknown Armies. Huge fan. I'm going to read some of the books. I will admit to not having done that. That's why Ben is here to be my literary crutch. Your tweets are like gold in the 21st century. I just like I could unsubscribe from every single other person and just subsist solely on the things that you write. And so if you
thank you. Think what I could have done if I hadn't been distracted by Twitter.
I don't know, man. Like you said, like Poe's really good with his short stuff. Maybe, I don't know that anyone's paying you for them. But I certainly love them. So, like I snipped a few of them, and then I honestly spent time I should have been reading God Cancer just looking for the two that I put in question 10. So I'm going to... I would love to talk a little bit about this, right? So in question 10, I said, I think one of the things that I find most interesting about you are the martial arts tweets, where you're talking about the dojo. And the two that I think of quite literally almost every single day. And I'm really curious to know if this is the same individual, or they just have the same, kindred spirit. You were talking about a guy who like commanded an entire room to just like bring it back down to a dull roar, as opposed to that like increasingly consistent, well, I'll talk louder now. And it's never a conscious effort, right? You just do it because everyone's doing it. And he's like, I'm going to do that every 10 minutes. And I was like, the fucking power that this individual held over the room. And I constantly am thinking about that. And I'm not really.
I have no idea who that was. I was at a martial arts convention and went up to a room party to drink someone's homemade bourbon.
Yeah.
And when I say it like that, it sounds sketchy as hell. But honestly, it worked out great.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are a number of things in my life where I'm like, it's
fine.
That's stupid objectively, and yet it turned out wonderful. Anytime someone has offered me homemade booze, it's been really good. And I'm like, I can't, in good conscience, tell people if someone says they want to take you to their hotel room and give you their homemade booze, you should definitely do that. I mean, I know sensibly, terrible advice, and yet,
but it's worked for me.
Experientially. Yeah. So yeah, that was just some guy who was in town from California or Hawaii, and yeah, as gatherings do, everyone was. There was this natural thing. Just always like, excuse me, everybody. Could we just lower our voices a little bit, and then it won't be so loud, and I'll do this in another 10 or 15 minutes if it's necessary. Mm-hmm. And everyone just was like, oh yeah, that's a really good idea. So what was the other one? Because I'm sure it's a different person.
Yeah, well, it seems like it has to be at this point. I mean, and there's a lot of them. Like, I snipped a few of them and just left them in here to just really give the interview the spirit of what I was looking for out of it. But the other one was the Mr. Rogers individual who preached like kindness, compassion, and patience, but then had like grips that made it feel like fire was coursing through every vein in your body.
Yep, that was also at the convention, but a different guy. And he was probably in his mid to late 60s, if not older, and had been doing jujitsu, for forever.
100 years, roughly.
There are some of these guys who, okay, you want to hear a true tale of martial arts adventure?
We do.
So there was a guy who, he's probably 65 or 70 at the time that this happens. And we find out that he had he had a dojo up north, and was really tight with my instructors, and they're like, oh yeah, apparently he had some serious heart trouble, and they put 7 stents in him.
Wow.
And so when we're talking with him about this, he's like, yeah, I gotta take it easy now, they won't let me shovel any snow anymore. He lives in Minnesota, shoveling his own snow at 65 or something, and he's like, the doctor said it was really weird because I didn't have any symptoms except that I would get tunnel vision while wrestling. And we're like, who were you wrestling with? He's like, oh, these college kids. And I'm like,
surely you jest.
Well, this is just a guy who has been an athlete his whole life, knows nothing else, and was in such surreally good shape that with his heart clogged to these tiny little pinholes, he could still function perfectly well, right, except that his lungs couldn't keep up with it. It's like when you hear about that one hypermiler who, it's like, oh yeah, he doesn't really get tired the way people do. If he didn't have to sleep, he would just theoretically be able to run until he died.
This seems about right. Yeah, I mean,
old age.
Right, you have to, I mean, obviously you know this, but right, you have to remember there are, 7 billion people on the planet and growing. There's a few of us that are really, really weird.
Yeah.
Not me.
Yeah, there are always, crazy physical outliers, so...
That's really
and cool. And one way to meet fascinating outliers is, do the martial arts for a couple decades, and you'll meet some people who can do amazing things.
I've got 2 more in here, and I'll end on the good one, and then we'll pivot back towards, like something resembling actual content and purpose, and not me just telling you I really enjoy your tweets. But another one that I put in there was is that April 1st, interestingly enough, says power unexercised is indistinguishable from weakness. Me encouraging my wife to make the kids do the chores, which is just beautiful on so many different levels.
Yeah, every now and then I just go full supervillain. Look, what would Dr. Doom say in this power unexercised is indistinguishable from weakness?
Right, but what he's actually right, and then we rack focus, and he's wearing a dishcloth or a dish towel or something.
Yeah, and it's a joke. That's a terrible way to live your life. So
I shouldn't have that above my headboard. Okay. No, I get you, Ben. You were saying something, I think.
I wasn't, but I can.
Do you want to? You get to say one thing.
Hi everybody. That's it. That's all I got.
You wasted your one thing on hi, everybody.
Having a good time.
One. Oh my goodness. Okay, so then I'll. I mean, obviously not end the interview certainly, but I'll end me talking about your tweets deliberately. This might just happen by happenstance. One that I copied down was, if you don't support what matters to you, it'll go away. And I think that is incredibly relevant today in modern society, when it comes to creativity, when it comes to entertainment, when it comes to storytelling, when it comes to writing, when it comes to literally anything, quite literally.
Well, and politics. I mean, if
there it is.
you do not, yeah, I mean, if you do not prioritize maintaining essential civil liberties, yeah, they're not like a weed that's just going to flourish wherever there's an empty patch of dirt. Yeah. They're like increasingly looking like a rare orchid that must be lovingly tended with an eyedropper.
Grown in darkness, usually with ice, finicky, strangely colored.
Yeah, and so, yeah, this is... Well, it's an interesting time to be a creative, because the barriers to being some kind of creative have never been lower. And the barriers to being a massively successful, super rich creator are extremely high. And it's very hard to get from, down here to way up here. And more, I'm like, do you really need to be way up here? I'm thinking about, okay, this will rile up the nerds.
Let's do it.
I think there will never be another Star Wars movie as good as Empire Strikes Back, because I think from here on out, the worst Star Wars movie will be like a B-, and the absolutely best will be like a B+. I think they've got it down to where they're like, this is the optimum zone for, we can have our characters do this, we can have our plot line look like this, we can have the development of our action beats look like this. It's a formula. This is the formula. And, I can't complain about formulas. I drink Coca-Cola, and the great thing about Coca-Cola is it's always Coca-Cola.
Yeah.
But I'm like, okay, I've seen great Star Wars movies, and I don't think I think I'm hitting the diminishing returns. And especially in times that are super trying and scary, like a global pandemic where you're stuck inside consuming a bunch of media. Yeah. People want something where it's like, I don't want to be bummed out. I don't want to be challenged. You know what's been challenging me? Staying alive. So maybe I'll just watch something that that isn't this massive, I don't need my mind blown. And, as a creative, back me up on this, you kind of want to do the thing that blows someone's mind. But now is not maybe the time when mind-blowing stuff is going to be super expensive and remunerative. But, that's okay, because you don't need to sell something to 10,000 people who are going to like it okay, when you can now sell it to 1,000 people who are going to love it a lot.
Yeah, so chat says something and it makes me remember, well, is Pepsi okay? And then 3 men laughed. But they'll get that joke in, would you say next month they'll get the joke?
Let's see. The book should be available in November.
Okay,
That's
yeah. Just
there are printing delays. It's going to be print on demand, and I'm like, do I want to try and do this so that if people order it in like what would be great is, if I can get it, get the orders in early in November. It'll take a few weeks to print them off, and it'll take a few weeks to get them sent. But it would be great if people could realistically get these by December for like Christmas gifts, if they want to give people Christmas gifts. But I'm not sure I'm ready to promise that, given how crazy everything's been.
Yeah, supply lines are just wild.
Yeah, and the Rain Kickstarter, people have been upset, and I don't blame them with how late that is. So yeah, I'm really gonna err on the side of conservatism when it comes to putting delivery dates on stuff. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna take where I think it should be and add 6 months.
It's pretty smart, unfortunately.
Well, I mean,
question from chat: will the book be available on Kindle? Or I
yes.
imagine any digital.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
Cool.
Digital is, I move a lot of stuff on digital. And I've read stuff on e-readers, but I do prefer the experience of having a tactile book.
Hold on. What is that behind you? Are those carcasses of trees?
Yeah.
Oh, weird. Okay. I didn't know people did that still.
That's my brag shelf.
Hey, yeah? Why? What's up there?
Well,
just everything you've made. I see Gen Con badges.
And I'm in all of those.
Yeah, there it is.
So
it's fucking sick.
Nice.
We've got
yeah.
I will not out anyone deliberately, but there are some fans of yours in the chat right now that may want to remain nameless. But this is their chance to talk to you if they want to say hello. Don't want to fanboy. Yeah. Ben, would you mind taking a question? I want to make sure that the cats didn't kill themselves or each other, so I have to step away for one moment.
What's happening?
You're gonna talk to Greg.
Oh yeah, I think I can handle that.
Can you do that?
I mean, I don't know. So this, Greg, this may just like derail the conversation, but because this isn't really a question. This is just me making a statement and hoping that you will have a response. Because like everything that you just said a minute ago, you kind of touched on like the quote unquote like altered landscape of publishing, which I went to grad school for creative writing. Have a master's of fine arts in creative writing, and man, so I graduated from that program in 2013, and that was like those prime years where all anybody talked about was like the changing landscape of publishing. It's going to be so different. It's so different now. It's going to be so different in the future. And like I feel like in some ways we're still in that, and it's never codified into a thing. I don't think that it necessarily will, and we're just like living this weird amorphous. Publishing is in a weird place right now indefinitely.
Well, William Gibson got it. And I've said this on multiple occasions. In one of his books, he has a character talking about why there will never be another Beatles. And he's like, the Beatles came along at a time when it was very expensive to record and broadcast music. And they were the band that everyone liked. Okay. Everyone liked the Beatles okay. Nobody really hated the Beatles, and a lot of people absolutely loved the Beatles. It's like, so they sold a lot of records. It's like, now, any chucklehead with a desktop computer can assemble and release music. And this is true because podcasting is basically, proves this perfectly. And so there is just this unbelievably expanded field of available content. I mean, when I was growing up, when I was a small child, there were 3 channels of TV, and you watched what was on. At any given moment, you could watch one of 3 shows, one of which would be like the McNeil-Lehrer News Hour.
Right.
So now people have so much more choice. that the only things that can break super wide, it is a few huge IPs like, Marvel, James Bond, kind of at that level.
Yeah.
Some of which have had dozens of or hundreds of creators working on them for decades. And, being a lone writer who wants to do his own thing, if you cultivate your audience right, you can, you kind of fly under the radar, but you can make it work, and you get people who get you. I don't ever want to disappoint a reader. I don't ever want someone to put my book down and say, well, that was a waste of time. And so, and this is, this is bad capitalism. Capitalism insists that what I should do is try to sell to everyone, regardless of how satisfied they'll be. But in the long run, I'm like, no, I think I really do better only selling to raving fans.
Right. Yeah. And it's like, I mean, this is a cliche, I guess, about pop culture things, but like kind of, makes me think of, and I don't know how true this is, but like, it's almost like you think about kind of this cliche of to break into that mainstream, you do have to get pretty formulaic, it feels like, or flatten some of the riskier elements potentially of whatever it is that you're doing. And again, that is not always the case. But I mean, by and large, it seems to be.
The alternate is Noah Dude.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. If you want your book to be published and popular because it's good, yeah, that's tough. And I hate to sound cynical, but I mean,
reality.
There's a lot of who knows who, and so.
Yeah.
It looks like we got a couple questions in chat. Did you finish your thought, Ben? I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, one thing I will add for the changing landscape of publishing, Kickstarter, especially for gaming, it is difficult to overstate what a big deal that has been, because when I started publishing games, seriously, the way you published your new game was you took out a second mortgage on your house, printed up 2,000 copies, hauled them to Gen Con, and hoped. And the usual outcome was you wound up with 1,880 copies sitting in your basement mocking you.
Yeah. Right.
It was brutal. People literally ruined their lives trying to publish games. So even just the shift to PDF, where it's like, okay, I can do this without having to risk tons of matter, has been an immense improvement. Okay, but the questions from the chat.
No, you're good. It's absolutely true. The first 2 years I went to Gen Con, I exclusively did panels, just learning about game design, talking to people, because that's the thing I always I bring up here. There is literally nothing special about me as a human being. I just happen to lurk on Twitter and either cold call game designers, publishers, authors, writers, whatever they may be, right? Or I sit and wait until they are foolish enough to say, I'm looking to talk on a podcast. I don't care if you're tiny and worthless. And then I'm like...
And then you pounce.
Have you heard about the Electric podcast? My name is Dave Pruner. I've been... we've got a YouTube, we've got a SoundCloud, we've got a Tumblr, Facebook. And
see, that's just the hustle. Yeah. Not everyone can do the hustle.
Yeah. Well, and
some people find that very draining and dispiriting.
That's true. That is true. I think like the one thing I try and make very clear is like I literally just ask, right? Like I talked to you, and then I waited patiently, like a good human being, and then you said, "Okay, I think I could do this. You know what would work?" And I said, "Yeah, let's do bang, bang, bang. Just try and be receptive." You know what I mean? And anyone can do this. Literally, any single human being can do this. Just believe
I have not found a lot of gaming professionals to be tremendously standoffish towards the public, or if they are standoffish towards the public, it's not because they're gaming professionals. It's because they're like, I don't want to talk to anyone. I'm shy. Yeah. It's not my thing.
Sure.
Not an extrovert. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's fair.
And I mean, I'm an introvert. I've just learned to fake it.
Right. Yeah. No, and that's completely it, right? Like by and large, gaming, and I imagine, although I cannot speak to literary circles, people are welcoming and friendly. They're happy to have you join the ranks. There's no competition. There should not be any competition. Right. Like I said.
You can find jerks and weirdos anywhere, and the more money is involved, the meaner people get, and I think the more controlling people get, as a general rule.
Is that why it works for gaming? Because there's no money. There's literally no money.
There's some money. Although from what I hear, the exception to this is romance. And, everything I've heard of, not everything I've heard about the romance field. There was recently this scandal with, some pretty serious racism and accusations flying around. But I've known a number of, romance writers and people who are self-publishing in romance or who are trying to break into romance. They're like, everyone is so nice and so helpful, and it's not like other genres where there's this sense of competition. It's like everyone's like, no, come, feel the love. I'm like, man, I wish that's what I thought about. I wish that's what I wrote, because it sounds like there's a lot of money in it.
We'll keep an eye out for it. Yeah. I mean, the core of your stories is still humanity. I think that there's some transferable skills there.
It's not, it's not my thing. I can open the spigot, but I really don't fully control what comes out. I don't think that I would be able to write a traditional happy ever after romance novel very easily. I mean, if you look at even the sort of romantic plots in my novels, as I'm reading this, I'm like, man, why do I have this recurring motif that, sexual jealousy is incredibly powerful and toxic? I'm like, that hasn't been that huge of a factor in my life, but boy, it sure comes up in my writing.
It's there in God Cancer.
It is. It's intensely destructive.
Yes.
So.
Yeah.
All right, let me jump on those questions and we'll pivot into something else.
Okay.
So first question, Toad Elevating Moment asks, are you working on anything for Delta Green right now?
I am not. Delta Green has this magnificent backlog of work that, let's see, the Labyrinth is out tangibly now, right? So
that I'm not sure.
Do I have it?
Chat will tell me, but
someone in chat. Well, I should. Oh, yep, it's out. I've got the physical Labyrinth. So Impossible Landscapes is still coming. They've got just this deep train. It's like a train with a whole lot of boxcars. Caleb Stokes is. I can't wait to see what he does. His Call of Cthulhu stuff. He's got one called No Security that's just fantastic. So I haven't. I know there's a big long podcast of Lover in the Ice, but I'm like, maybe I'll just wait till it comes out officially to read that. So you got that. You got Impossible Landscapes. You have. I'm just trying to remember the gigantic.
Yeah.
The gigantic backload that is slowly moving its way through Arc Dream. And so, yeah, adding another caboose to that. I was fortunate that I got my Delta Green role-playing game stuff in early. So I was like right behind the coal car with Control Group.
Yeah.
And, and it can be pretty exhausting. Writing for Delta Green is demanding because it's like I want to do something that a GM at home could not.
Yeah.
So, I tried to really, really push myself hard on the Control Group stuff. And Yeah. So it can be harder than writing for some other lines.
Okay, that's neat to hear. So the second question, I think the way it reads might have related to, Ben, your question, so you might have to fill in some gaps for me here. But Bonkaruni asks, do you think that expanded field is good or bad for humanity? On the surface, it feels good, but part of what makes creative experiences so important is the fact that it can be a shared experience for a culture.
Oh, we were talking about how the expanded field, I think, is referring to the idea of how easy it is for anyone to be a creative now. And yeah, I mean, as with so many things, there's upsides and downsides. The upside of everyone being able to be a broadcaster is that you have all these crazy conspiracy theories and fringe political people who previously would have been just that one guy who you'd never sit next to at the Denny's. They can now find each other and begin recruiting with big, with sort of crowd tactics instead of having to individually hunt down and brainwash vulnerable individuals. But yeah, it is. Culture does seem to be in a lot of ways fragmenting. It used to be there were three companies doing the news. You could watch your ABC News, your NBC News, or your CBS News. And now we have all kinds of micro-targeted, tailored news sites. And the idea of the agreed-upon common set of facts has become much muddier and murkier.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can meet someone from Malaysia who shares your interest. You can, share book recommendations with someone in Brazil where they're like, oh, did you ever read this book? It's just been translated into English. Knowing how much you like Thomas Ligotti, I think you'll like this, this Brazilian Thomas Ligotti who's more influenced by magical realism. I haven't actually read that. I hope it actually exists. That would be so cool.
Yeah, somebody go find that for us real quick.
Where's super depressed George Louis Borges?
Yeah, and I feel like I got a little bit lost in the question there, Dave. Is there any way you could read that one again? I'm sorry.
I could.
It was interesting. I wanted to respond to it a little bit, but I kind of got lost.
Do you recognize the name? Bonkaruni?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Just making sure. So in reference to how anyone can create and release things now, right? So that the gatekeepers are dead, yeah. The internet is a powerful series of tubes. Is this, ability to reach everyone and bring everyone up to that same level a good or bad thing? On the surface, it feels good, yeah. But part of what makes the creative experiences so important is the fact that it can be shared and a shared experience for a culture.
Yeah. So, I mean, man, I think Greg already nailed this because it's the same thoughts, really, that I think everyone does have, like, in their own community sort of a shared culture, but it may not be, widely shared in the larger culture, right? So, I mean, I think there's definite upsides, there's definite downsides. The thing that I think continues to be challenging is just how crowded the field tends to get, and I think you see that in so many places right now. And I mean, I think more than anything, it's a positive thing because I do think that there's something psychologically challenging about having too much choice. But at the same time, it's not something that I'm going to complain about. So I feel like there's, having to kind of challenge yourself to say, all right, like there's all these things out there. I have to get better at finding my people, finding that community that I want to be a part of. And there's something great about knowing that that community does exist. You just have to do that extra work to find it.
Well, and I think the positive that maybe is less apparent to three white guys is that
that's real.
is
That's the
that a
thing.
lot of marginalized identities, what I immediately think of is, if you were transgender growing up in Iowa in 1970, that is not a fate I would wish on my worst enemy. You wouldn't understand anything. You would think you were the first person it had ever happened to in history.
Yeah.
You would be utterly lost, compared to growing up as a transsexual as a transgender individual in Iowa in 2020. Yeah. You will be on the internet at you'll have it figured out in like 5 months, just from the internet. And anyone within 100 or 200 miles of you, you might be able to actually meet them in person and find someone where you're like, oh my God, I thought I was the only one. And I think that is, in some ways, the best thing the internet has done, is reduced that awful sensation of, oh God, I'm the only one. Mm-hmm. Because no matter, how weird or wrong or bad you are, you can find someone who agrees with you. So by the same token, if you are just, not bad, but just a little niche, you can find your people.
Yeah, framed a lot less eloquently. I'm a firm believer in there are no one-hit wonders anymore, because you can do a thing and always find someone who's interested in it. You keep at it, you will probably find dozens of people who are interested in it. And it's very interesting to have seen that kind of change. And like you said, the internet is this tool to bring people together, to bring communities together, to and then, as you put it so well, right? Like, it has created echo chambers that have done irreversible damage to political landscapes, to quite possibly the entire world. I don't know that there's a way to fix that, right? Like, we might just have to deal with that because it's done so many other good things.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a terrible year, and things are terrible. But at the same time, I've something I've said to people recently is, at every point in history, there have been people who believed they were living at the end of time. Now we look back with nostalgia on the 80s, and I'm like, were you in the same 80s as I was, where every morning you got up and thought, I wonder if that decrepit old man in the White House is going to destroy us all in a rain of nuclear fire today? I mean, so, worrying about disaster is nothing new. Yeah. We all did in the 70s and 80s. I would rather be alive in 2020 than in 1914. I would rather be alive in 2020 than during the bubonic plague years, or, there's never been this ideal time in history. And a lot of people have nostalgia, thinking back, everything was so much better in the past. And I'm like, well, that, or maybe when you were 10 or 12, every grown-up around you was in unspoken conspiracy to keep terrible things away from children.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at what was actually happening in these times when everyone is so nostalgic for, and you're like, no, it wasn't that great. Terrible things were happening. You just didn't hear about them because you were 10.
I just have to say, Greg, that I love hearing you say all that too, because I'm thinking, like, in the context of having written a eldritch horror, Lovecraftian pessimist type of story, to hear you say, like, it's not all that bad, it's bad. It's a nice
bad, but they're not irredeemably bad or worse than they've ever been.
Yeah. Right.
Something else I've been I found out recently that something that I believed was scientific fact may in fact be an incorrect theory. But I had heard this thing that someone had run the math on the genetics, and they're like, oh yeah, every human being alive comes down to a pool of about 15,000 common ancestors. This may not be true now.
Okay.
Or It may never have been true, but I thought it was true. And I'm like, wow, that's like half the audience at a packed Wrigley Field game, maybe less than half. Like, that was how close humanity got. You know, we came through this little tiny, tiny aperture and bounced back. So I'm like, yeah, climate change is a disaster. It's a mess. Things are going to be very difficult and are going to be very demanding of us, but it's not going to, you know, end the species.
So
right.
I hope.
Completely unrelated to that, but that feels like it leads into like my favorite like theory of the possibilities of other intelligent life, or indeed any life, is and I never remember if Fermi paradox, right? Like
the Fermi paradox.
Yeah. Fermi.
Yeah.
Yeah. Essentially asking like,
that's how I've heard it. I don't know.
Yeah. Who knows? Are humans special? Are humans early? Are humans very late? Right. And there's like 1 to 2 different options for each of them. But I really like you said, and I guess we don't know, we probably can't fact check it here right now live on Twitch, but like, are there that few people? You know what I mean? That same sort of, right, this tiny little thing that then spirals back outwards. It's this narrow little window of like, did we get lucky? Are we all that's out there? Are we just early? Is everyone else hiding?
Man, I recently wrote this science fiction story. I'm polishing it. I'm you know, showing it to the writers group, but it answers the question why, you know, why, if aliens are out there, why haven't we heard from them? And the answer in this story is, oh yeah, we make contact, but the people in charge cover it up. Because the aliens are like, no, we're not going to trade with you. No, we're not going to give you technology. No, we're not going to enter into some kind of cultural exchange. No, yes, we can travel faster than light. No, we're not going to let you do it. You're not as interesting as you think you are.
Boy, humans just couldn't handle that. Our just entire perceptions would be shattered. Imagine telling a human they're not special. Oh, they'll never shut up.
Hey, so it's so funny that this is coming up. I don't know, Dave, if you're like snooping on my Facebook or whatever, but I really have been going down the rabbit hole of like UFO conspiracy stuff lately. Yeah. I was heavily into that stuff when I was in my teens, and grew out of it for a long time, and then like there's this whole thing with Tom DeLonge and UFOs and his whole To the Stars Academy. I'm not going to go into it, but man, it's everywhere right now. And I'm like, I'm loving it, but I'm like, let's talk about UFOs for a while. I'm good with that.
Yeah. Okay. So like we'll agree to meet back here in like 2 weeks time. And we'll just talk about any old thing we want.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Okay. That's really cool. That's like why I love having my own show. So I've been lucky enough to do a few tabletop shows with other channels and other brands and stuff. But like a lot of them have like really specific like, Dave, please don't talk about politics. Dave, could you be family friendly? And I like kick the stream up and I'm like, fuck Donald Trump. Fuck the police. Defund them today. And it's just really nice that I can say that. And I like, who's fucking... What are you going to do? You can't touch me. You don't give me any money, so you can't hurt me. Like,
everyone's a publisher.
Yeah. So anyway.
The way I still, whenever I think about the vast expansion of access to releasing your ideas, I remember the single sentence Justin Tekeli used to sum this up, which is, now every jabroni with a word processor is a publisher. And I'm like, that's it.
Yeah. We got
the rest of us can stop trying to phrase this.
Yeah, this is gonna go ahead and change my Twitter profile real quick to a jabroni with a Twitch show. I'm not like other guys. I have a podcast. Okay, so we talked about 2 things, and then obviously Ben, if you have anything you want to jump on, you should do it. So we touched real quickly on conspiracy theories. And also books that you had been reading recently. And I would love to hear about both of them. And maybe at the same time, if you think you can do it.
Yeah, someone was I'm trying to remember who was recently saying we should not... That, it's a bad idea to create media based on conspiracy theories now, because conspiracy theories have become such a poisonous, toxic, destructive element of commonplace belief that the idea of an accurate fact-based narrative of events is eroding under our feet.
Right.
And so they're like, yeah, creating conspiracy theories is not the worst thing you can do, but it kind of, it's not pulling any oxygen away from that fire.
Mm-hmm. Right. Is it ethical to create conspiracy theories when significant voting portions of the population will not go and bother to fact check them?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. It's so, I mean, I think I've just moved away from it, just basically from distaste, where I'm like, it's not like an ethical choice, but like more like, I don't want to do that. I get enough of that in reality. So yeah, I mean, if I came up with something that I thought was so brilliant and insightful and powerful, and it required me to write about a conspiracy theory, I'd probably do it. I don't know if I'd show it to anyone.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, timing's a thing.
Timing.
The last game I wrote a short game that is called Drunk Cops of Windermere. It's heavily inspired by Terry Pratchett's book Guards, in that, it's like, yeah, it's a fantasy city. You guys are the city watch who are in charge of keeping order. And it's this procedurally generated series of calls that you have to go and somehow deal with. And you're not trying to solve crime or save lives. You're just trying to get through the night. And also you're loaded. So, and I got this and I'm like, this is pretty fun. And then this whole summer exploded. And I'm like, I can't put out a cop game. I can't do that.
Yeah.
Right.
What kind of a jagoff would I look like if I did that?
Yeah. No, it's true. I
mean,
the awareness there also speaks volumes to, you as a creator and you as an individual. Because the summer was just potholed with people who didn't have that tasteful.
Well, I've touched that hot stove a lot.
Is that wisdom?
You touch the hot stove enough, and you get to learn how to tell when it's hot, and you get to learn not to touch it when it is.
Fire indeed hot. Okay.
This is William Blake said, if the fool pursued his folly, he would eventually become wise. So maybe that's what happened. So I'd like to bring that out sometime when it's not going to feel like a slap in the face to a lot of suffering people. So yeah, what I'm reading. Let's see, what have I read lately?
Yeah,
I went to
the chat just loves this, so they can get good book recommendations.
I saw someone on Twitter and found out she wrote The Year of Yes, which is a memoir of her dating life in New York, where it was such a disaster. She's like, I'm just going to say yes to everyone who asks me out, who is not obviously a serial killer. And so it's very witty, and so she's got some just very snappy one-liners. I earlier read what's her name? Lindsay West. I think it's called The Witches Are Coming, which is a very similar thing. It's extremely political. And so it is this blend of very, very bitter, caustic takes about the current political situation and great jokes.
Yeah.
So it's kind of,
you don't get too down. It kind of ride the wave.
Yeah. It's extremely angry, but that one was good. Let's see. What genre stuff have I read recently? I'm trying to think. I should go look at my pile of, I kind of tend to move, and then once I'm done with the book, I pile it on the dresser until Martha gets mad. Yeah. So I'm trying to mentally remember what is on that pile, but I'm not doing very well. All right.
Feel free to stand up.
I was going to say, I've got maybe a I've got maybe a recommendation too. So, Greg, have you read by any chance The Gone World by, I'm going to butcher his name, Tom Sweeterlich?
Nope.
Sweeterlich?
Never heard of it.
I just read that on a recommendation from a friend of mine. And man, that one, it's one of the best dark sci-fi. Yeah, I don't know how else to describe it. Dark sci-fi. There's some horror feel to it, but it's not really a horror novel. But if people are into that, real dark kind of mind-bendy sci-fi that's also very character-driven, that was one of the best ones that I've read in recent years. So
let me go look at my heap.
Yeah.
Hold on. This will just take a sec.
Yeah. We're coming right up against my soft cap. Not to say that obviously Greg and Ben can't talk amongst themselves. So Chad, if you're hanging out and you haven't been able to get your question in there, now is the time to act.
All right. Here's what I've recently read. So Dead Air by Ian Banks, who's also known as Ian M. Banks, and wrote the Culture novels. He also writes real.
And yeah, I've got a few of them.
Yeah, The Player of Games and all those. His literary fiction, I prefer his science fiction. His literary fiction is usually, I've read two of his literary fiction books, this one and The Crow Road. And they're usually about highly educated, London-dwelling, well-off ne'er-do-wells, and their sexual exploits and interpersonal drama. This one has got a pretty interesting twist, which is that, you say that hunting humans for sport is the most dangerous game. Yes, those of you who've never cuckolded a human trafficking gangster will say that. And so it does have, I read it because someone was talking about the use of cell phones in horror and how they sort of are a game changer. And this was cited as an example of having a very, very tense climax that depends on cell phones. And so that is handled very well. So this it's good. It's not great. It's from 2002. So it's, man, is it feeling a little dated now?
It's only 18 years ago. It can buy cigarettes, but no.
It was new to me.
Yeah.
Medusa's Web by Tim Powers. Tim Powers, it's hard to go wrong with Tim Powers. I read this and I read Alternate Routes, and I think I liked Alternate Routes a little better. It's a little more action-y. And, with Tim Powers, it's always a pretty good bet to say, well, is it time travel or is it ghosts? Or is it time traveling ghosts? And so Medusa's Web is one of the time traveling ones, and it handles time travel so weirdly. It's such an interesting, never fully explained, always demonstrated through implication kind of time co-experiencing thing. And it's like, we're never going to get to the bottom of this. It's got if you find the experience of reading a book and thinking, if I had just 3 more IQ points, this would make sense to me. And, probably this is true regardless of your IQ. Remember when I was talking earlier about, you can create the illusion that you know what you're talking about.
That's exactly how I exist.
So, yeah, Powers is really good with that. So that's a recommendation. I have to shill my buddy Gareth. This is his second fantasy novel. Gareth Hanrahan is, has done a bunch of stuff for 13th Age, and his novels are really good. They're these big, thick fantasy horse chokers with just all kinds of, very, very, very high fantasy, loads of creativity, characters contend with the very gods themselves, but also kind of this this film noir not. It's got the film noir kind of, I don't want to say aesthetic, what am I thinking? Sort of a film noir ethic to it, where everyone's bent and everyone's a little bad.
It's just got that set dressing.
And well, it does take place in a city with lots of mist and fog, but it's more that everyone is morally compromised.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
So, yeah, you don't read the Shadow Saint, or what was the first one? Was the Gutter Prayer? Yeah, don't read these expecting, oh, we will know who the good person that we're rooting for is.
Yeah.
So it'll be more like, oh, there's this person who's not great, and then there's these people who are absolute moral abysses. So yeah, that's what I've been reading.
That's awesome. Yeah, obviously, well within your rights to refuse it. I've definitely poked people in the past to take a photo of that and tweet it out. It usually gets pretty good traction.
A photo of the books they're reading?
Yeah, just like the stacks sideways, so you can see all authors and everything
Sure.
else. Also, Squid, thank you for cheering 500 bits. That's very kind of you. We had one question in chat, and then as you were checking your books, I was just kind of mentioning we'll be up against 8:30. That will be my soft cap for tonight. Obviously, if Greg and Ben want to continue having conversation, that would be awesome. And that's up to you if you have time. But I will have to.
At some point in here, I'll have to eat. But
yeah, I was gonna say it's basically my bedtime, so it's like 8:30. Man, it's getting late.
Yeah.
You're one of those.
I had a lot of fun. At some
You're
point,
a morning person, aren't you, Ben? Aren't you?
Not by choice. I'll say that. Not by choice.
Interesting.
It's when I try to do my writing, so I have to try to get up at like 5 a.m.
Nice.
Oh.
And obviously, Greg, I really want to make sure that you had that opportunity to kind of say what you wanted to say. You came on this and humored us for so long, talked about books and writing and game designing and conspiracy theories and the political state of the world.
I've certainly said my piece. I felt very welcomed, and this was a treat.
Cool.
So
the
I'll
question.
Get that.
Oh yeah. Get that photo ready.
Get that photo.
So the question was, why is it that the horror genre speaks to you in particular?
I'm a deeply anxious person. It's.
Oh fuck. Oh no, is that why I like it?
Well, I remember something. I remember something. Someone was talking about. This woman was talking about why horror movies are so popular with women. She's like, yeah, there's this perception that they're this very guy thing, but she's like, speaking for myself, it's nice to go to a piece of fiction, to go to a film that isn't going to tell me that it's all in my head and I'm just being silly and hysterical and that, no, things are fine. Your worries are dumb. It's like, I like to go to a movie now and again that says, yes, things are wrong. Things are dangerous. You are not stupid to be careful.
Right.
And so, I feel that the horror genre is in some ways an anodyne to a culture of happy, positive anesthetism. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it's also can be its own form of anesthetic, because you read the horror novel and you're like, oh, I'm sure glad that's happening to that poor sucker, not me. I have this very, very fond memory of reading The Ritual, Adam Neville's book. And so this is probably another, I probably cribbed a little from that for the descriptions of the chill and the misery of the Antarctica parts of God Cancer, although it's worse in The Ritual because these poor dunces are just out camping and are woefully underprepared. Yeah. And so, there is this very mundane threat of, we are camping above the Arctic Circle and are lost. And, so that's their first set of, wow, they're really screwed. And then one of them gets injured. And I'm like, wow, you're really screwed. And, and then eventually they find out there's something in the woods with them that can flay an elk and throw it 30 feet into a tree. I'm like, you're so screwed. And I distinctly remember reading this book curled up on the sofa under a blanket with a big basket of hot popcorn going, oh, these poor sons of bitches. Oh, they're almost out of food. Are they going to eat that one last Nutri-Grain bar tonight for dinner or save it for breakfast? I can't wait to find out. Blah, blah, blah.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
So that's the unsophisticated non-philosophical appeal of horror is just better than you than me, you poor sucker.
That sums it up. I mean, that makes sense, Yeah.
Yeah.
You just go indulge in a little, and then you leave, and you're theoretically safe and happy, and right, yeah, go home to your boring suburban life.
It's been hard. I've been reading over God Cancer, looking for those, spots where an extra carriage return got stuck in, and I'm like, is the nightmare world I conjured of illness and unwise exploration actually not as bad as what we're going through right now? Because, I mean, I went through a period where I'm like, I'm not going to write science fiction anymore. I can't keep up.
Yeah.
And now I'm like, man, am I going to have to give up horror because I can't keep up? But I did come back to science fiction. So... yeah, there it is.
Well, we are all thankful for it.
Weirdly, when I wrote this, I mean, part of it is you do have a bunch of characters who are forced into these close conditions where they can't get away from each other. In one case, it's, oh, we're all on this boat, and, we don't want to get off the boat. And it's sort of a luxurious cage, but still, you're stuck with the same people. Mm-hmm. And the doctor does at one point go off about, he's like, oh yeah, because it's great working and living and playing and socializing and being surrounded at all times by my patient/employer. That's great. Mm-hmm. Who could want more?
Yeah.
And then, you've got the poor scientists in Antarctica who are just stuck in these two vehicles until they get to, the mountains of madness. And then it's like, I think I just want to hide in the vehicles.
Yeah. No, I don't want this. Yeah. The horror of knowing is probably my favorite trope, right? Like, you were better off not asking, seeking that answer. When done well, it's just... Ken Hite, said, you're not doing horror right unless the players are afraid of the treasure. And that is what I go into every session with. Like, I don't want you to be afraid when you think you're in control. I want you to be afraid of what you've done. Like, that is the moment I'm looking for.
I've been playing Unknown Armies, and we've reached the stage of character development where we're all scheming against each other, and it's like, why can't you just trust me and take me seriously and give up this thing that you've devoted your life to?
Yeah, this thing that you believe so strongly that you have warped reality around you.
Yeah. Why can't you just give that up for the pleasures of being a decent person?
Yeah. Absolutely beautiful. Wonderful game. Cannot recommend it enough. Yeah, no, it has created some of my best gaming moments, period.
My fellow characters have been screwing me pretty hard though, so
you must have, you didn't write something in the back of the books like, I can do whatever I want, I'm in charge.
No, I have to play by the same rules. I have to play by the same rules as all those peasants, otherwise it's unfair.
Yeah. Otherwise they won't play with me anymore. That seems about right.
Yeah. So,
Ben, did you have anything you wanted to get in there?
No, to whom should I at this picture?
Yeah, you can add it to me, or you can just post it. I'll retweet it. It'll find its way amongst circles and whatnot. But yeah, it has become a bit of. So I started the Electric Dice podcast in 2015. We did a couple creator interviews. I never say his name right, but we did Tuomo Spirinen.
Okay.
Graham Davis, a couple of the old like Games Workshop and Warhammer Fantasy guys,
Okay.
Jason Anarchy, and we used to always end the interview. My brother would ask, "You're trapped on a desert island. You can only bring three games with you. What do you pick?" Right? Because he was like, I don't know, this was 5 years ago, so he was 17, but you know, he didn't
Okay.
think like a 17-year-old, and so we just gave him an easy one, real softball, right? And but we can't ask that anymore because they broke it in half. Tuomo Spirinen brought a cell phone with him so he could play Puzzles and Dragons, and then he's like, and then I'll just call to get off the desert island. So yeah, that question's dead. So now we'll end with the book photo.
All right. I'm typing in the titles for people who can't see my, can't see the picture very clearly because,
It didn't do too bad. Yeah, you've got good lighting. We pixelate it out every now and then, but also our Discord window and then like to Twitch is it's about half as big. So like even when it's pixely, the resolution is rather forgiving. But okay, cool.
It's not letting me spell Ian the way I want. I'm putting the names and titles in the text.
Yeah, that seems about right. Okay, cool. No, this was really awesome. Once again, thank you so much for sitting down and having a conversation.
It was a delight.
It was really interesting.
Yeah, this was awesome.
And obviously, like it was deeply touching, and it was really sad. I didn't realize you had lost your father to cancer. My mother had a colon cancer scare at 40. So now it has become a pretty big deal in my life that they're watching me for the same sort of thing, because it's so atypical for her being a woman and also so young. So I got a colonoscopy at the rousing age of 25 and get to repeat that every 5 years.
But they gave you propofol, right?
They did, yeah. Well, and I'm lucky enough to know, right? And that's the point.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about that a little bit in the afterward. It's like, okay, awareness, prevention, monitoring, right? All of these things are ways to combat it. That not everyone has that luck or those tools. So
yeah, that was something that I don't think it was Mukherjee, but there was some somebody writing about the cure for cancer is like, we have the cure for cancer. You know what the cure for lung cancer is? It's don't smoke.
Mm.
You know what the cure for skin cancer is? It's sunscreen.
Yeah.
Like, what people want is the cure after the fact instead of and they're willing to disregard all we know about prevention.
Yeah, they don't want the cost. But yeah, I'll clip that and send it to my father. That'll go over real well. And on a high note. Yeah, Ben, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it. It helped me feel a lot better about this. Obviously, I think Greg and I would have had a bunch of grand old conversations, but I liked that you and he were able to talk about literary things. And
this is a good mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, this was awesome. Thank you so much for having me on. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and it was great meeting Greg. This was awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, cool.
Thank you.
Well, we just spiked up to 16 viewers, which is the highest it's been all night. So that's just in time to leave. So thanks, y'all, for coming by. Funny enough, in 5 minutes, we will be playing Microscope RPG, which if you can't find a happy in between playing, a tabletop game, perhaps Dungeons and Dragons, and writing a novel, you can play Microscope RPG by Ben Robbins and do both. That's what we'll be doing.
Yeah.
But that is
I've never played Microscope, but I've heard good things about it.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to have Ben Robbins on for a creator interview maybe 2 months ago. And I told him to his face, I was like, I've never played your game rules as written. And he goes, well, did you play it correctly? And I was like, okay, define that. And he's like, well, did you respect everyone at the table? Did you not, nix anything that anybody said? Did you not talk over anybody? And I was like, oh, absolutely. He's like, well, you played it correctly. I don't care. And I was like, I love you. But
yeah, there's, my thing about the hot stove and touching the hot stove. Early on in my career, I decided that trying to get people to play the game exactly right is a hot stove. I'm like, people are going to change your shit, Stolze. It is not this precious pearl that you have bestowed on them. They're going to do what they want with it.
Yeah.
So
Well, and
it's a hard lesson, but it's a good lesson.
yeah, I'm a real bad. I call myself a bad player in that way. Like I will use anything in my toolbox exactly as I need it to, and I don't much care for what your intentions were. But I will do you
The William Gibson quote.
Which one was that?
The William Gibson quote, "The street finds its own use for things."
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I don't think I've ever heard that, actually.
I think it's from the short story Johnny Mnemonic.
Wow. Okay. I've seen the movie, but, have not read it.
Yeah.
The story's better than the movie, I'm going to say.
It's got Keanu Reeves in it, so it can't be that bad.
Everyone's favorite cyberpunk icon.
Yeah, true enough.
I have to say, I think my favorite recent Keanu Reeves thing was Keanu Reeves playing asshole Keanu Reeves in Always Be My Maybe.
Oh, I didn't see that.
I've heard so much about it. Haven't seen it either. Yeah.
He plays himself as just this twit, and I'm like, you have.
Greg, thank you so much. It really was a pleasure. Like I alluded to earlier, be happy to do this again at some point in the future. Anytime, you are always welcome here. We do not represent many, but we're happy to have a good time and talk about games and writing.
Yeah.
All right.
Stay in touch.
Absolutely.
All right.
Ben, thank you for joining.
Sign off.
Yep.
All right.
Get my food.
Got it.
Yeah. Enjoy.
Ta-ta.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.